I never imagined that the 4th of July, supposed to be loud, bright, full of fireworks and grilled food, would become the day I learned the truth my father kept buried for decades. My name is Ethan Hale, and this is the story of how burning $35,000 in a single night didn't just cost me money. It tore open the reality of who my father truly was. I grew up in a small coastal town outside Boston, where Independence Day was practically a religious holiday. My father, Marcus Hale, was the kind of man everyone in town admired. Laughing, firm-handed, respectable, disciplined. The kind of man people assumed had no flaws. The kind of man kids like me were expected to admire without question. But admiration is easier when you're young and blind. By the time I turned 35, I had already distanced myself from my father, moved out early, built my own business, tried to create a life that didn't orbit around his approval. I wasn't angry at him. I was simply tired of chasing a version of manhood he never clearly defined. Yet despite everything, every 4th of July, he always insisted the entire family return home for his grand celebration. This year felt different. My father was more intense, more demanding, almost paranoid. When he called me 3 weeks before the holiday, there was a tremble in his voice I had never heard before. "Ethan," he said, "I need you here this year. No excuses. We're doing something special. Something important." I thought he meant some kind of family reunion. I had no idea he meant a test. When I arrived on July 3rd, my sister Isabella, 2 years younger than me, greeted me at the door with a forced smile. Her husband Julian stood behind her, carefully avoiding eye contact. Even my mother, Clara, looked strangely subdued. The house felt colder, emotionally, not physically. "What's going on?" I asked. "Dad's being intense," Isabella whispered. "He's acting like this 4th of July is some kind of destiny." Our father soon walked in, his presence filling the hallway like a storm cloud. His hair was grayer, his eyes sharper. "You're here," he said to me, gripping my shoulder. "Good. Tomorrow is the day." "What day, Dad?" I asked. He didn't answer. He only smiled, a tight, unsettling smile that said he knew something we didn't. The next morning, he gathered us all on the back lawn, where he had set up a massive bonfire pit. My father wasn't one for symbolism, so the sight alone made my stomach tighten. He emerged from the house, carrying a heavy metal lockbox. I had never seen it before. It looked old, dented, scratched, almost war-scarred. He placed it in the center of the lawn and motioned for us to sit. "The Hale family," he began, "has been built on strength, on sacrifice, on truth. Those who deserve inheritance must prove they have the discipline to wield it. Ethan, today is your test." My test. He unlocked the box and opened it with a dramatic slowness. Inside were bundles of cash, thick stacks of $100 bills. My breath stopped. "How much is that?" I asked. $35,000, he said proudly. "Your grandfather left it, and now it's yours if you pass the test." I didn't understand. Then he handed me a lighter. "Burn it," he said. "Burn it all. Right here. Right now. If you want to prove you are worthy of what I built. If you want to prove money does not control you." I thought he was joking. No one in their right mind would ask their child to burn $35,000 in cash. But he stared at me with fierce conviction, as if this was the most rational demand in the world. My mother gasped. Isabella looked horrified. Julian muttered, "Marcus, this is insane." "Silence," my father barked. "He must choose." I felt humiliated, like a child being measured by a twisted ruler. Anger rose in my chest. Why would I do something so stupid? I asked. "To prove you are not weak," he said. "To prove you have discipline. To prove you are a Hale." I looked at the money, then at my father, who had built our whole lives around control, power, image. I realized something then. This wasn't a test of discipline. It was a test of obedience. And I refused to bow. I pushed the box toward him. "No." His face darkened. "Coward," he whispered. "You'll regret this." I should have walked away. I should have ended the conversation. But he stepped closer, towering over me, shouting about how I'd always been soft, always been weak, always been unworthy. Something inside me snapped. "Fine," I thought. "You want a display? I'll give you one." Without speaking, I grabbed the box, marched straight to the fire pit, dumped all $35,000 into the flames, and flicked the lighter. The fire exploded upward, devouring the cash instantly, turning it into a furious cascade of burning green ashes. Everyone screamed. My mother cried. Isabella shoved her hands over her mouth. Julian backed away in shock. And my father fell to his knees. No, he croaked. No, no, no. For the first time in my life, I saw pure terror in his eyes. You weren't supposed to actually burn it, he whispered. But you told me to, I said. He shook his head violently, gripping his hair. That money, Ethan, that wasn't inheritance. He stopped himself mid-sentence. I stepped forward slowly. Then whose money was it? He didn't answer. But that was the moment everything changed. The moment I realized this wasn't a test of character. It was a test to see how far he could manipulate me. And I had just destroyed something he never intended to lose. For the rest of the day, he shut himself in his office, leaving the rest of us in stunned silence. My mother tried knocking several times, but he never responded. At dinner, the seat at the head of the table remained empty. Everyone was shaken, confused, scared, but I was angry. Burning $35,000 didn't hurt me financially, not as much as it hurt him emotionally. The real loss was the truth it uncovered, that the money wasn't what he claimed, and that he feared its destruction more than he feared losing his family. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I walked downstairs to get some water and heard a muffled argument coming from my parents' room. My mother was crying. My father's voice was low, desperate. You promised me, she said through tears. You said you were done with that life. I was, he snapped. But I needed one last deal, Clara. One last deal to fix everything. My blood froze. One last deal. I crept closer, my heart pounding. Marcus, my mother sobbed. Tell me the truth. Was that money theirs? My father didn't answer. That silence was the answer. The $35,000 I had burned wasn't his. It belonged to someone dangerous. And I had just lit the fuse on something far bigger than a 4th of July bonfire. Before I could step away from the door, the floor creaked beneath my foot. My father yanked the door open instantly, like he had been waiting for it. He stared at me with eyes that no longer looked like my father's. How much did you hear? He whispered. Enough, I said. His jaw tightened. Ethan, he said quietly, you've put us all in danger. I didn't sleep that night. My father's warning repeated in my mind like a ticking bomb. Danger. Who was he talking about? What had he involved himself in? Why was $35,000 worth panicking over? At sunrise, I found him sitting on the back porch, staring blankly at the dying ashes in the fire pit. He looked smaller, older, almost defeated. Sit, he said without looking at me. He sat. For several long minutes, he said nothing. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Dad, I finally said, tell me what's going on. He exhaled slowly. You think I'm a strong man, he said, but you don't know the truth. Then he told me. Back in his early 40s, when the economy crashed, his business nearly died. Instead of declaring bankruptcy, he made a terrible choice. He borrowed money from people no one should ever borrow from. Men with quiet voices and violent reputations. Men who didn't care about contracts or laws. He repaid most of it. But recently, buried under unpaid medical bills for my grandmother and a brutal downer in the market, he got desperate again. He reached out to them one last time. I thought I could fix everything, he whispered. I thought I could pay them back before anyone found out. But that money you burned, that was the repayment. I felt sick. So what happens now? I asked. He met my eyes, empty and resigned. They'll come. My father had always been a man who stood tall, never shaken, never afraid. Seeing fear in his eyes unraveled something inside me. Suddenly, the man I had viewed as controlling, arrogant, manipulative was just a human being drowning in the consequences of his own mistakes. Why didn't you tell us? I asked. Because you deserve better, he said quietly. I wanted you to have a father you could be proud of. Not this. For the first time, I felt the weight he carried. Not to justify his behavior, but to understand the cracks beneath it. We can fix this, I said. But he shook his head. This isn't something that can be fixed, Ethan. These men, they don't negotiate. The next 48 hours were a blur of fear and preparation. My father spoke in riddles, refusing to give names or details, insisting it was better if we didn't know. He told my mother to take Isabella and Julian to a hotel 2 towns over. He told me to stay. Why me? I asked. Because you're the only one strong enough to face this with me, he said. Those words, strong enough, made my throat tighten. For years, he'd called me weak. Now, when the world was collapsing, I was the one he trusted. But I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified. On the night of July 7th, just after sundown, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. 2 men stepped out, sharp suits, sharp eyes, sharp expressions. Their names were Anton Vargon and Lucas Marrow, though I didn't learn that until later. My father stepped outside before they could reach the door. Marcus Hale, the taller man, said calmly, "We heard you had a payment for us." My father swallowed. There's been a problem. The man tilted his head. A problem. I stepped beside my father before he could say another word. "I burned the money," I said firmly. "Not him. If you're looking for someone to blame, blame me." My father tried to push me back, but I didn't move. The 2 men stared at me, expressionless. Then the taller one, Anton, smiled faintly. "Well," he said, "that's certainly patriotic of you." "This isn't his debt anymore," I said. "It's mine." My father whispered, "Ethan, no." But Anton raised a hand, silencing both of us. "Interesting," he said. "You destroy our money, and now you want to repay it yourself." "Yes. And how do you plan to do that?" "I'll work for it," I said. "Whatever it takes." My father looked horrified. Anton exchanged a glance with Lucas. "Marcus," Anton said, "your son has more spine than you ever gave him credit for." Then he turned to me. "Very well," he said. "We'll give you time. 45 days. If the debt isn't repaid, we'll collect in other ways." I nodded, though my pulse hammered in my ears. And just like that, they left. My father collapsed onto the porch steps, his breath shuddering. "Ethan, why would you do that?" "Because you're my father," I said quietly. "And because your mistakes are not bigger than my responsibility to protect this family." He looked at me for a long time, eyes wet, jaw trembling. And for the first time in my life, he said the words I had always longed to hear. "I'm proud of you." What followed were the hardest 45 days of my life. I sold my motorcycle, liquidated part of my business assets, worked overtime contracts, took consulting jobs, everything I could do legally and honestly. My sister insisted on helping despite my refusal. Julian pitched in as well. Even my mother, quiet and gentle, pushed her own savings into my hands. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming our family from the shadows my father had dragged us into. On day 44, I paid the debt in full. Anton accepted it with the same calm expression he arrived with. "You're a man of your word," he said. "Rare these days." Before leaving, he looked at my father. "You owe your son more than you can ever repay." My father nodded silently. That night, our family sat together for the first time in years without tension filling the room. The fear was gone. The secrets were gone. And the weight that had strained us for decades had finally been lifted. But I learned something else, too. Strength isn't loud. Strength isn't control. Strength isn't making others bend. Strength is facing the consequences of someone else's mistakes because you refuse to let them face it alone. That 4th of July didn't just expose my father's truth. It revealed the truth about me, too. And it rebuilt a family that almost burned with that $35,000. If you want more stories like this, make sure you comment below and tell me where you are watching from.